The penthouse floated above the city like a world detached from everything human. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the skyline, where headlights streamed like veins of light and distant sirens faded into a dull hum. Inside, however, there was nothing but stillness. No laughter. No conversation. No life that felt ordinary. Alexander Veyron stood barefoot on the cold marble floor, his tie loosened, his shirt half unbuttoned. He hadn't changed since returning from the office hours ago. Work used to anchor him, numbers, negotiations, victories, but lately, none of it held meaning. Not since the twins were born. Not since the doctors had spoken in that careful, rehearsed tone. He turned toward the far wall, where a grid of monitors glowed in the dim light. 12 camera feeds, each showing a different angle of the same room, the nursery. It was designed with precision, soft neutral tones, organic wood textures, carefully selected lighting calibrated to never overwhelm sensitive eyes. Every detail had been optimized by specialists. And yet, no design could fix what mattered. Ethan and Elias lay in their small beds, separated by barely a meter of space. Identical in every way, same soft curls of dark hair, same delicate features, same quiet stillness that felt unnatural for children their age. Their bodies were fragile, unmoving below the waist. Their ears, unresponsive to the world. Their voices, never heard. Alexander walked closer to the screens, his reflection merging with the image of the nursery. It made him feel like a ghost standing inside their world but never truly part of it. He picked up the remote and tapped a button. The system responded instantly. Camera 3 expanded, filling the wall with a close-up view of Ethan. The boy's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling where a soft projection of shifting shapes drifted lazily, muted blues and warm golds designed to stimulate visual engagement. Alexander leaned forward slightly, his gaze narrowing. Anything, he muttered under his breath. Just give me anything. This had become his nightly ritual. Watching, waiting, searching for something the doctors might have missed. A sign, a crack in the certainty that his sons would never truly connect with the world, or with him. At first, the cameras had been about control. He trusted no one completely, not even the carefully vetted nurses and therapists. Wealth had taught him that betrayal often wore a polite smile. But over time, the cameras had turned into something else entirely. They were his only window. The only place where he could observe without interrupting, without projecting his own desperation onto them. Here, behind the glass of technology, he could pretend to be objective. But tonight, something felt different. He couldn't explain it, just a tension in his chest, a quiet sense that something was about to shift. He switched angles. Camera 5, Elias. The second twin lay in the same position, his gaze slightly angled, as if following a different path across the ceiling. For a moment, everything looked exactly as it always did. Still, silent, unchanging. Alexander exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. Pointless, he whispered. He was about to step away when something caught his eye. A flicker of movement. His head snapped back toward the screen. Ethan's hand. It was barely noticeable at first, a subtle shift, almost like a muscle spasm. Alexander frowned, leaning closer. No, I've seen that before, he murmured. The doctors had explained it. Involuntary nerve signals. Random. Meaningless. But then it happened again. This time, it was clearer. Ethan's fingers curled inward. Slowly. Deliberately. Alexander froze. The movement stopped. Then repeated. Not random. Not chaotic. Controlled. His heartbeat quickened, a sharp, sudden rhythm that filled the silence of the room. Wait, he said, his voice barely audible. He grabbed the remote, his fingers fumbling slightly as he zoomed in further. The image sharpened, Ethan's small hand now dominating the screen. The fingers curled again, one by one. A sequence. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. That's not possible. He switched instantly to Elias. The second twin had turned his head, just slightly, but enough to change everything. He was watching Ethan's hand, not passively, not coincidentally, intently. And then, Elias moved. His fingers began to curl in the exact same pattern. Perfectly timed, perfectly mirrored. Alexander stumbled back a step, his mind struggling to keep up with what his eyes were showing him. No, he whispered, shaking his head. They can't coordinate like that. He rushed back to the console, activating the recording system. The software whirred to life, capturing every second, every movement. He split the screen, Ethan on one side, Elias on the other. Side by side, the pattern became undeniable. 2 fingers. Pause. 3. Pause. 1. A rhythm. A structure. A language. Alexander's chest tightened as a realization began to form, fragile, terrifying, impossible. "They're talking," he said, his voice cracking. The room seemed to shrink around him. Years of certainty, medical reports, expert opinions, definitive statements, began to fracture under the weight of what he was witnessing. "They're talking," he repeated, louder this time, as if saying it might make it real. The movements grew faster, more complex. Ethan would initiate. Elias would respond. Back and forth. Flawless. Not a single hesitation. Alexander felt a chill run down his spine. "How long?" he whispered. "How long have you been doing this?" Minutes passed, though they felt like seconds. He couldn't look away. Every fiber of his being was locked onto the screen, absorbing, analyzing, trying to understand. Then, without warning, it stopped. Both boys went still. At the exact same moment. The sudden absence of movement was almost louder than the motion itself. Alexander blinked, his breath shallow. "Why did you?" He stopped. Elias was moving again. Not his hands. His head. Slowly. Deliberately. Turning. Toward the camera. Toward him. Alexander's entire body went rigid. The angle was wrong. The positioning didn't make sense. From where Elias lay, the camera wasn't an obvious focal point. It was discreet, embedded, designed to be unnoticed. And yet, Elias's gaze locked onto it. Unwavering. Focused. Aware. Alexander felt something primal stir in his chest, a mix of fear and awe so intense it left him breathless. "That's not," he started, but the words died in his throat. Elias's expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. The corners of his mouth lifted. A smile. Not random. Not reflexive. Intentional. Knowing. Alexander staggered backward, his hand gripping the edge of the console for support. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. You don't know I'm here." But deep down, he felt the truth pressing in. Heavy. Unavoidable. What if they did? What if they had always known? The screen flickered slightly as the system adjusted its focus. The moment passed. Elias's face relaxed. His gaze drifted. The stillness returned. Ethan lay motionless. The room looked exactly as it had before. Quiet. Empty. Unchanged. But Alexander knew that nothing was the same anymore. He stared at the monitors, his reflection staring back at him, pale, shaken, unrecognizable. "They're not what we thought," he said softly. His voice sounded foreign in the silence. "They've never been." The city lights outside continued to pulse, indifferent to the revelation unfolding high above them. Somewhere far below, life went on as usual. But in that penthouse, in that nursery, something extraordinary had just been uncovered. And Alexander Veyron understood one thing with absolute certainty. He was no longer watching helpless children. He was watching minds. Awake. Hidden. And waiting. Alexander did not leave the nursery for a long time after that first response. The world outside, the meetings, the calls, the empire that depended on him, fell into a distant, irrelevant blur. For the first time in years, something existed that he could not delegate, could not buy, could not force into submission. Understanding his sons required something else entirely. Patience. He remained kneeling between the two small beds, the notebook still open in his lap, a pen gripped so tightly in his hand that his knuckles had turned pale. On the page were scattered markings, lines, numbers, rough attempts at patterns that only half made sense. One finger. Yes. Two fingers. No. It was crude, incomplete, but it was a beginning. Ethan's hand rested lightly in his, warm and fragile. Every time the small fingers moved, it sent a shock through Alexander's chest, as if each motion rewrote everything he thought he knew about reality. He swallowed, steadying his voice. "All right," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. "We go slowly." He raised one finger again, making sure it was clearly visible. "If you understand me right now, show me, yes." For a moment, nothing happened. That familiar doubt crept in, sharp and insistent. Maybe it had been coincidence. Maybe he was seeing patterns where none existed. Then Ethan's fingers curled once. Alexander exhaled sharply, almost a laugh escaping him. It wasn't loud, but it carried relief, disbelief, and something dangerously close to hope. Good, he whispered. You understand. He turned slightly toward Elias. And you. Elias didn't move his hands. Instead, his eyes shifted, slow, deliberate, sliding toward Alexander's face. It wasn't the unfocused drifting he had seen so many times before. This was precise, measured, present. Alexander felt his throat tighten. You don't need to copy him, do you? He said, almost instinctively. You can answer your own way. A pause. Then, slowly, Elias's fingers moved. One curl. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Both of you, he murmured. You're both there. The silence in the room changed. It no longer felt empty or hollow. It felt charged, like the air before a storm, full of something unseen but undeniable. He flipped to a fresh page in the notebook, forcing his thoughts into order. We need more, he said. More than yes or no. His mind raced, pulling from logic, from systems, from every negotiation and code he had ever built. Language required structure, symbols, consistency. He looked back at Ethan. 1 finger is yes. 2 is no, he said slowly, as if speaking alone. What about numbers? He hesitated, then tried. 1 finger means 1. Ethan's hand didn't move. Alexander frowned. No, that conflicts, he muttered. You're already using 1 for yes. He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. For a man who had solved problems worth billions, this felt impossibly complex. But then something unexpected happened. Elias moved. Alexander froze, watching closely. Elias lifted his fingers, not curling them, but tapping lightly against the mattress. Once. Pause. Twice. Pause. 3 times. Alexander leaned forward, his heart beginning to race again. That's different, he whispered. Ethan followed. The same pattern. Tap. Tap tap. Tap tap tap. A new system. Separate from the yes-no responses. Alexander's mind snapped into focus, the pieces beginning to align. Numbers, he said, almost breathless. You're showing me numbers. He grabbed the pen, writing quickly. Taps equals. Numbers. Curls equals answers. He looked up again, his eyes shining with a mix of excitement and disbelief. You created this? He asked, his voice barely steady. You made your own way to communicate. Ethan's fingers curled once. Yes. Alexander let out a quiet, incredulous laugh, shaking his head. Of course you did, he said. Of course you did. A strange warmth spread through his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the kind tied to achievements or power, but something deeper. Something human. He leaned closer, lowering his voice instinctively, as if afraid to break whatever fragile connection had formed. Okay, he said. Let's try something else. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Do you know who I am? The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, neither boy moved. Alexander felt his pulse in his throat, each second stretching longer than the last. Then Ethan's fingers curled. Once. Yes. Alexander's breath caught. He pressed further, unable to stop himself. Am I, your father? This time, both boys responded. 2 identical movements. 2 small hands. 1 curl each. Yes. The word echoed in his mind, louder than any sound. Yes. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes, but he didn't look away. He couldn't. You knew, he whispered. All this time, you knew it was me. Elias's gaze softened again, lingering on Alexander's face as if studying it, memorizing it. Not as a stranger, not as a distant figure, but as someone familiar, someone important. Alexander's composure broke. A tear slid down his cheek, then another. He didn't wipe them away. I thought, he started, his voice cracking. I thought you were trapped somewhere I couldn't reach. That you didn't even know I was here. Ethan's fingers moved again. 1 curl. Yes. Then, after a brief hesitation, 2 curls. No. Alexander blinked, confused, trying to process. Yes, and no, he repeated. He looked between them, searching for clarity. You knew I was here, he said slowly. But you thought I couldn't reach you. Ethan curled 1 finger. Yes. The realization hit him like a physical force. They had been aware. They had understood. But they had also known he didn't understand them. A barrier, not of ability, but of communication. Alexander let out a shaky breath, covering his mouth for a moment as emotion surged through him. I was right in front of you, he said hoarsely. And I still couldn't see you. Elias blinked slowly, his expression calm, almost reassuring. Alexander lowered his hand, his voice steadier now, though still thick with feeling. That changes now, he said. Everything changes. He straightened slightly, a new kind of determination settling into his posture. Not the cold, calculated resolve of a businessman, but something warmer, fiercer. Personal. I'm going to learn this, he said. All of it. Your system. Your language. We'll make it better, faster, clearer. He glanced at the notebook. And then we'll build something more. Technology, interfaces, whatever it takes. I'll bring in the best minds in the world if I have to. He looked back at them, his gaze unwavering. But this time, it won't be about fixing you. His voice softened. It'll be about understanding you. Ethan's fingers curled once. Elias's eyes closed gently, as if in quiet agreement. Alexander reached out, placing 1 hand over each of theirs, holding them carefully, reverently. For the first time, the contact felt real. Not one-sided, not empty, connected. The silence remained, but it no longer felt like a void. It felt like a space filled with meaning, waiting to be translated. And as Alexander sat there, between his sons, he realized something that no amount of power or wealth had ever taught him before. They had never been broken. They had simply been unheard, and now, at last, they were beginning to speak.